Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavijyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhutaguhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarvavide Namaha. Very good. Welcome back to our ongoing study of Shankaracharya's Upadesha Sahasri. We get to see chapter after chapter his brilliance coming out quite strongly. We're coming now to the end of chapter 17, Ikshitratva, the status of being the observer of the world, observer mostly of your mind. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. There are two very short questions related to the subject matter we'll take up first. First question, in the last class we talked about the pancha kosha, the five koshas, and the questioner says the koshas, the description of the koshas as sheaths or coverings is questionable. In fact, I negated that because Atma cannot be said to be inside the other koshas. Actually, Atma is inside and outside, Atma being all pervasive. So the question here then is Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita that Atma is located in the heart. How are we to understand that with reference to these five koshas? So Atma is in the heart. Again, inside and outside, not stuck inside there. By the way, when the word heart, hrit or hridaya, is used in Advaita Vedanta, it always means mind, intellect. So that's a reference unto consciousness illumines the mind. The one all-pervasive consciousness is present, illumining your mind. And because it illumines your mind, it is said to abide in the heart. So that abiding in the heart, it's a expression, an idiom commonly used in these teachings. Last question. Consciousness or self is described as the knower, and our body and mind and everything else is known. Correct. Knower and known are distinct from each other. Correct. But does this not contradict the principle of non-duality in Advaita? We've actually covered this many times, and it's surprisingly easy to reconcile. The first time you hear that, oh my God, knower and known. It's such an obvious duality. Yet everyone says this is Advaita Vedanta. And at first it may seem like an insurmountable challenge. It's actually handled very simply. We have pot and we have clay. We have two things. One clay and one pot. We don't count them as two because pot is not as real as clay. Simple? So we can call them two. We can call it form and substance. We can call it pot and clay, but because they're not equally real, we don't count them as two. For example, if there's a real elephant, that would be interesting, a real elephant wandering around in this room, and you also dreamed of an elephant. Do we have two elephants? One is real, one is not as real. So in order to count two, the two things have to be equally real. Now, knower and known primarily is with regard to your mind. You, as consciousness, are the knower. Thoughts are known. Perceptions are known. Emotions are known. All mental activities, vrittis, are known. And what are those thoughts? What are those vrittis? We had a very detailed discussion in a prior chapter about thoughts being like a form superimposed on consciousness. Just, excuse me, just like clay is, just like pot is a form superimposed on clay, in the same way, thoughts are mental forms superimposed on consciousness. So you have a pot made of clay, you have a thought made of consciousness. Where's the duality? Thoughts are made of consciousness. Forms are not a second thing. And we understand not only are the forms in your mind less real than consciousness, but the entire world of names and forms is less real than consciousness. Since all that is known is less real than consciousness, your true nature, sat-chit-ananda atma, for this reason, the duality between knower and known is easily resolved. Okay, with that said, we can continue in our class talking, in fact, that topic, knower and known, continues, being the observer of especially what's in your mind. Let's see, then I think we'll finish this text today. We'll see. Maharajadayo loka, Maharajadayo loka, Mayi advat prakalpitaha, Mayi advat prakalpitaha, Swapne tadvadvayam vidyad, Yadvadvayam vidyad, Rupa vasanaya saha, Rupam vasanaya saha. Start at the beginning of the third line, swapne, in dream. So we're going to get the metaphor, dream state, and then what the metaphor represents, waking state. First is the drishtanta, the metaphor, then comes the darshtanta, which is waking state. In a drishtanta, swapne, in a dream, mayi, on me, referring to consciousness, on consciousness, prakalpitaha, everything is projected on consciousness in a dream, such as what? First line, lokaha. Loka has a surprising number of meanings, one of which is experience, and that meaning works very nicely here. Experiences, it's plural. What kind of experiences? Maharaja adayaha. Experiences adayaha, such as being a Maharaja, king. So someone might dream of being a king. That king is a mental projection, and it lasts until you wake up. You get to be not even a king for a day. You get to be a king just for the period of your dream. But the point that Shankara wants to make here is that while you're dreaming, you say, I am a king, right? That's your experience in a dream. I am king. I am Maharaja, until you wake up. So what happens when you're awake? So Yadvat, you can see, connects to Tadvat. For our Sanskrit students, Yadvat introduces the Drishtanta, Tadvat introduces the Darshtanta. In the same way, by the way, this metaphor of the Maharaja and this last part also about Dvayam, this is another reference to the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. We've seen Shankara drawing upon that Upanishad in several verses. And as I suggested before, it's quite possible he was either studying or teaching that Upanishad while he was composing this particular chapter. So, tadvat, in the same way, and just as you identify with the king projected in your mind during a dream, tadvat, in the same way, you identify with dvayam rupam, two kinds of forms. Two kinds of forms, the commentator says, murtam and amurtam, which may be from that Brihad Aranyaka quotation. I don't recall. So, murtam, form, physical body, amurtam, formless, referring to mind. So, in the same way, there is a body and mind in the waking state, vasanaya saha, along with vasanas. Now the commentator doesn't translate, but he says vasana here means subtle body. And I've taken that translation, but in retrospect, that doesn't seem very intuitive here. So I would suggest we just take vasana in a more conventional sense of impression. Seems to work better here. So just take vasana in a conventional sense of an impression. So vidyat, this should be understood. What should be understood? Let's see the whole verse now. Just as in a dream you project this king, projected upon what? Consciousness. Not only do you project the king upon consciousness, but you identify with it. So in the dream you say, I am king. And Shankaracharya says, in the same way, in the waking state, you project, he leaves a lot out, because this is the style of a more sophisticated text. He leaves a lot out. What do you project in the waking state? I am a man, I am a woman, I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a doctor, I am an engineer, etc., etc., etc. By the way, your status as a man or woman, that is a conclusion, that is a part of your self-identity. You stay with me now. Self-identity exists where? Your body is male or female, but the sense of being male or female, that self-identity exists in your mind, does it not? Your status of being husband, wife, doctor, engineer, all of these roles you play are all rooted in your self-identity, in your mind. We call it, well, it's more than ahankara. Ahankara is a technical term for a sense of self, but this goes beyond ahankara. This is your self-identity. And ego in the Western sense, your sense of personhood. So all of that, according to Shankara, is equally projected in your mind. See his point. In a dream, you project, I am a king, and then you wake up. In the waking state, you project, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a husband, I am a wife, etc., etc., and then you fall asleep. And it goes away, right? So your kinghood, is that the right word? Kingship, perhaps. Your kingship comes and goes. Your maleness or femaleness comes and goes. How real is that? Not only that, this is taking it one more step. When you wake up out of a dream, you realize, oh, I wasn't really a king. I experienced being a king, but I wasn't really a king. Watch this. When you wake up out of the dream of ignorance, you realize, oh, I wasn't really a man, woman, husband, wife. I experienced it, but now that I've woken up out of the dream of ignorance, I know that experience was false. Experience in a dream, experience of your kingship in a dream is false. Experience of your personhood right now is false. What is real? Consciousness. The consciousness by which you knew you were a king in a dream, the consciousness by which you know your maleness or femaleness right now in the waking state, all of that comes and goes. Kingship comes and goes. Personhood comes and goes. What doesn't come and go is your essence as a conscious, awareful being. That consciousness, sat-chit-ananda atma, is your reality. Then, same thing as Eve is developed here further. Dehalingatmana karya, dehalingatmana karya, vasana rupina kriya, vasana rupina kriya, neti netyatma rupatvan, neti netyatma rupatvan, na me karya kriya kvachata, na me karya kriya kvachata. Karya and kriya, we have to connect these two words. Kriya, actions. Karya, have to be done. Actions have to be done. Who has to do actions? Husband, wife, doctor, engineer, right? Does consciousness do anything? We've had this discussion several times. We know that consciousness is the unchanging awareness or consciousness that illumines the changing conditions of your mind. We've had this discussion a lot. I won't dwell on it. So unchanging consciousness can't do anything. Actions are done by whom? By the one who says, I am king, does actions in a dream. The one who says, I am husband, wife, doctor, engineer, is the one who has actions to do, responsibilities to be fulfilled in the waking state. So all of these actions that are performed, all of these are due to deha lingatmana. Deha, physical body. Linga here is a technical word for sukshma sharira. Deha is sthula sharira, obviously. Linga here, they often call it linga sharira. Linga here means that which indicates. The first meaning in the dictionary for linga, I believe, is that which indicates something, including that which indicates your gender, but that's not our topic here. So that which indicates, linga. That which indicates you as a sentient being is linga sharira, sukshma sharira, body, mind, and senses. So, atmana, due to identification, taking it as atma, self, due to identifying yourself with the physical body and mind. And why would you identify with your body and mind? Vasana, rupina. This identification is in the rupa, in the form of vasana, impressions, in particular, ignorance. So the ignorance which remains actually from, when did ignorance start? Oh, by the way, commentators love to argue about this stuff. And we're not going to get into it, because by arguing about the nature of ignorance, what do you hope to accomplish? It turns out to be a subject of considerable debate, but a debate that has questionable value. So we're not going to get into it. So this identification with your body-mind is vasana rupa. It is conditioned. It carries on. Actually carries on life after life. So you have this, the actions you perform, first half, the actions you perform are due to this habitual identification with your body and mind. Just as in a dream, you say, I am the king, I am ruling the kingdom. In the same way, in a waking state, I am husband, wife, doctor, engineer. I am fulfilling the duties of my role. This is identification. Let's be very specific. Identifying yourself as an agent of action. Very, very fundamental. I am a doer. And because I am a doer, I have things to do. But neti atma-rupatvat, atma-rupatvat, because the true nature of atma is understood through neti, negation. The true nature of atma is understood through negation. What is negated is identification with your body and mind. What is negated is identification with the doer, identification with the role, identification with being husband, wife, doctor, engineer. That negation is like you wake up out of the dream and you know, oh, I'm not a king, I don't have to rule the kingdom. And here, you wake up out of the dream of ignorance. You realize, I'm not husband, wife, doctor, engineer. I am unchanging consciousness. Duties still have to be performed, but not by consciousness, not by you. By the body, mind, sense complex and the whatever remains of ahankara, actions get done naturally. The actions get done because they need to be done. The famous Zen story where the master tells a student, before I was enlightened, I chopped wood and carried water. Now that I'm enlightened, I chop wood and carry water. Previously, the master was identified as the wood chopper and water carrier. After enlightenment, the master is no longer identified with being the wood chopper and water carrier. Therefore, with this understanding, waking up out of the dream, you know you're not a king. Waking up out of the dream of ignorance, you recognize that you are not an individual person engaged in action, and with that realization, name karya kriya kvachita, for me, for pure consciousness, unchanging consciousness, for my true nature as consciousness, na kriya karya, there are no actions to be performed kvachit at all. So this, I think this is to me this is remarkably clear, and I hope it's as clear for you. Then, natato mritata shasti, natato mritata shasti, karmano jnana hetutaha, karmano jnana hetutaha, mokshasya jnana hetutvan, mokshasya jnana hetutvan, natadanyarapekshate, natadanyarapekshate. Tattaha, from that, from what? Karmanaha, from karma, due to actions. So, just a brief introduction to this verse. Conventional life is so focused on doing, doing. You've heard the joke, are you a human being or are you a human doing? Interesting observation. Because even though human doing doesn't sound right, it kind of expresses a fundamental truth. Our lives are molded by what we do and not who we are. So that's the point of that. So action is so central to conventional life. Conventional life is what? Gaining happiness and avoiding sadness. That's conventional life. Driven by raga and dvesha, as we've discussed so much in our Bhagavad Gita classes, driven by this compulsion to get what makes you feel better, driven by the compulsion to avoid that which makes you feel bad. So this is conventional life, driven by action. Very interesting. Coming to this Advaita Vedanta class is an action or not? This is an action. So now the question becomes, can any action make you enlightened? Can any action free you from identification with your body and mind, which makes you, body and mind have so many problems, therefore you're definitely going to be driven by raga and dvesha. That's a whole idea of conventional life. So can you kind of get out of this struggle of conventional life through some kind of action? And that's what Shankara is dealing with here. He says, tataha karmanaha, due to action, na amrita asha asti. We have to break all these words apart. Na asti, there is not. There is not any asha, some of you know, hope. There is no hope of amritata, amrita immortal, amritata immortality, and that's a code word we've seen before for enlightenment. So through action, Shankara says in the first half, through action there is no hope of immortality. Wow. That includes the act of coming to class. There's something very fundamental that we need to understand here. Let me show you on the board. Push the right button here. Yes. Okay, what can be accomplished through action? There are four categories of things that you can accomplish through action. There are things which are apya, things which can be obtained. You can obtain something through action. Through your action of coming to class, you can obtain knowledge of what Shankaracharya teaches in Upadesha Sahasri. I'm being sarcastic. Because becoming a great scholar of Shankaracharya's teachings is not going to make you enlightened. This is an example of apya. What you get won't make you, and instead of using enlightened, how about perfect peace and contentment? Let's substitute that. Can you gain, what is it you need to get for the sake of perfect peace and contentment? If you get a $100 million lottery, unimaginable, will that buy you perfect peace and contentment? If you think about it, It's interesting to think about it. The day you find out you're the lottery winner, you will be high as a kite, as they say. You will be absolutely ecstatic. A week later, you'll still be pretty ecstatic. A month later, it's starting to little less. A year later, starting to come back down to earth. 2 years later, more back to earth. 10 years later, you'll be no happier than you were before, right? That's how it works. That's exactly how it works. You might be more comfortable, so you'll be living in your $20 million house, pretty comfortable. But you can be, like that expression, you can be uncomfortably miserable, or you can be comfortably miserable. But in both cases, you're miserable. So anyway, the point is, through obtaining things, you cannot gain perfect peace and contentment, enlightenment. Second category is Upadesha. These are important terms used to describe this in a very accurate way, very precise way. Upadesha is that which is created. So that which you create. So if you're an artist, you can create a piece of work. If you're a video producer like me, you can create a video. What can you create that will make you enjoy perfect peace and contentment? What will make you enlightened? You can't create. It's nothing that is created. Enlightenment is not something you can obtain. It's not something you can create. It is not. Next. Vichara, transformed. Is this all on the board? Yes. So the third category of what can be accomplished through action, vichara, that which can be transformed. So what can be transformed is what is subject to change. What is subject to change is your body and mind. What transformation of your body and mind would result in perfect peace and contentment? Definitely, the transformation can improve the quality of your life. You can enjoy relatively more peace and contentment, but our definition of enlightenment is perfect peace and contentment, which I think you'll agree is not possible through any form of transformation. No perfection is possible for the body and mind. And I've given this metaphor before, and that is if you go to the gym and work out 8 hours a day, every day, when will you have a perfect body? You'll get a lot. You'll be pretty, what is the term? Buff. You can really get a nice body if you have a good diet and you work out every day. When will your body become perfect? Never. Why should it be any different with your mind? Your mind can become better and better and better and better. Absolutely. When will your mind become perfect? That's the point. So through any process of transformation, perfection is not possible. And the last category of what can be accomplished through action is samskara. Samskara, cleansed, I think is the best translation. Oh, that's right. I think it's spelled right, cleansed. So samskara is a process of removing, literally it's perfecting something. And the root meaning of this. Sam plus kr, the word Sanskrit also comes from the same thing. It means that which is made perfect. And in context, that which is made perfect by removing all the imperfections. So you make pure water by removing all the impurities. So is it possible to remove all the imperfections of the body and mind to create this condition of perfect peace and contentment? You get it. It's pretty obvious that all of our actions can only have limited results. And the irony is what we seek is a limitless result. Can you achieve, and limitless perfect peace and contentment, can you achieve a limitless result through limited actions? This is Shankara's argument, very important argument in Advaita Vedanta, an argument which, let me come back here, an argument which leads us to turn away from karma, action, as a means to fulfill the highest goal of life. Karma is absolutely necessary to fulfill your responsibilities in life. By the way, your responsibilities, I don't want it to sound grim. Oh, I have to spend my whole life doing responsibilities. One of your responsibilities is to enjoy your life. Ever think about that? Remember the 4 goals of life? Dharma, artha, kama. Kama. Pleasure, enjoyment. One of the 4 legitimate goals of life. So you have a responsibility to enjoy your life. And it's definitely going to take effort, action, to do what needs to be done so you can enjoy your life and fulfill all your other responsibilities. But the point here is none of those actions can ever lead you to enlightenment, can ever give you that perfect peace and contentment, including the act of coming to this class, including the act of learning whatever Shankaracharya has to teach. And some of you watched my recent video on how not to study Vedanta. At the very beginning of that video, I make this extremely important point, and that is the way we conventionally study a subject matter is to extract the information that's contained in that subject matter. And if you adopt that same strategy of study in this classroom, you're wasting your time. Full stop. If you are coming here every Sunday to learn about what Sri Shankaracharya teaches in Upadesha Sahasri, if you want to extract that information like you do in all other forms of study, if that's your intent, you are literally wasting your time. The study of Vedanta, as I said in that video, the term study of Vedanta is a misnomer because we don't come here to study Vedanta. The subject matter is not Vedanta. The subject matter is your true nature. So to say the study of Vedanta is a misnomer, to call this atma-vichara, self-inquiry, is far more accurate. And then it's further more accurate to say that this process of atma-vichara, self-inquiry, is then guided by these teachings. That's accurate. So these teachings then guide you on a process of self-inquiry. That process of self-inquiry leads to, simultaneously, the discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda, atma, and simultaneously the destruction of identification, removal, I should say, the removal of identification with your body and mind, that removal of identification which was due to ignorance. These are two sides of the same coin, gaining knowledge and removing identification and the ignorance that caused that identification. This is a result not of academic study. This is a result of self-inquiry, atma-vichara, guided by these teachings. So, what is it that makes you enlightened? What is it that leads you to perfect peace and contentment is not action. What leads you to perfect peace and contentment is, as I just said, atma-vichara, self-inquiry, guided by these teachings, which culminate in the discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda Atma, and the simultaneous removal of ignorance and the identification with your body and mind that it causes. And that's what Shankara concludes here. He says that action, we're not done with the first half yet. So he says that tataha karmanaha, due to action, na asti, there is no asha, not even a hope of gaining enlightenment, gaining perfect peace and contentment. Why? Ajnana hetutaha. Ajnana hetutaha, because all action is driven by ignorance, ajnana. All action is driven by ignorance. Now that's pretty abstract, right? So what does that mean? All action is driven by ignorance. Well, what drives action is raga and dvesha. Why did you come to class? Raga. Which is not anything wrong with that, but let's just understand it for what it is. So all action is driven by raga, dvesha. What is the root cause of raga, dvesha? What my guru called self-non-recognition, failure to recognize your innate completeness and perfection, failure to recognize that inner divinity, your true nature as sat-chit-ananda Atma. So look at that. Action is caused by raga, dvesha. Raga, dvesha is caused by ignorance. Avidya, kama, karma. We've had that on the board before, right? Avidya, kama. Actually, the other way around I did. Karma, kama, avidya. Due to avidya, ignorance of your true nature, you naturally have kama, desire, failing to recognize your innate fullness, completeness, that inner divinity. So due to ignorance, you have kama, desire, and due to kama, desire, you engage in karma activity. That very clearly shows how all action is based on ignorance. And that which is based on ignorance, this is a little bit of logic, but I think you'll appreciate it. That which is based on ignorance cannot remove ignorance. It's like in the dream, as long as you're dreaming, you can't get rid of the dream elephant. The only way you can get rid of the dream elephant is by coming out of the dream. So your efforts, and that's perhaps not a very helpful metaphor. Anyway, the logic here is you can't use ignorance to destroy ignorance. Knowledge removes ignorance. Karma, simply put, karma does not remove ignorance. Knowledge removes ignorance, and that's what Shankara concludes here. Mokshasya jnana hetu twat. By the way, twat, that final takara becomes n due to grammar rules. So jnana hetu twat. Because moksha is the product of knowledge, Mokshasya jnana hetutvat, because moksha, liberation, enlightenment, perfect peace and contentment, because it is the result of knowledge, natad anyat apekshate. Natad anyat, nothing else apekshate is required. No actions are required. The actions you do, let's come back to the board, the actions you do can accomplish a lot in the world. Tremendous what you can accomplish through these four means, through these four kinds of action. What you can accomplish in the world is tremendous, but you cannot, through any of these four kinds of action, you cannot accomplish, so to speak, enlightenment. You cannot gain enlightenment. Okay, and that brings us to the last verse of this chapter. Amritam cha bhayam nartam, amritam cha bhayam nartam, neti tyatma priyo mama, neti tyatma priyo mama, viparitam viparitamato nyadyata, viparitamato nyadyata, tyajetat sakriyam tataha, tyajetat sakriyam tataha. Excuse me. So, amritam, again, literally means immortality, but it's like a code word for, it's an idiom, we'll call it, for enlightenment. The enlightenment is abhayam, freedom from fear, and na artam, suffering. Freedom from fear and suffering. That's a nice definition. Freedom from fear and suffering. We've given the metaphor previously of the lucid dream. Remember that metaphor? So imagine you have a lucid dream. In the dream, you know you're dreaming. It's like you're awake inside the dream world. And in the dream world, you see an elephant charging at you. Will you be afraid? If you are awake to the fact that it's a dream, if you know, oh, it's only a dream. It's only a dream elephant. How can the dream elephant hurt me? And then suppose the elephant steps on you. Will you suffer? It's a dream. You know it's a dream. It's the equivalent of being awake. When you wake up, you know nothing in the dream was real. This is a situation, a lucid dream is a situation in which you don't have to wake up to know it's unreal. So while you're dreaming, you know it's not real. That which is, and we've had this discussion before, that which is less real than you cannot harm you. Let me say that again. That which is less real than you can't hurt you. Abhayam, freedom from fear, comes in recognizing that nothing in the world is as real as you in your true nature as sat-chit-ananda, atma. Nothing in the world can cause suffering. Artam means suffering. Nothing can cause suffering because atma is unchanging. Unchanging consciousness can't make a transition from fullness, completeness, peace, contentment, and then it makes a transition to suffering. That's change. We've said so many times that Atma is unchanging consciousness. And Sri Shankara explains that a little bit in the next line. He says, Na iti atma, neti iti atma. Atma which is known through neti, na iti, atma which is known through negation. What do you discover through that process of negation? What's left when your process of negation is complete? A good way to approach this is, actually a better way to approach this, is meditation. Watch this. Suppose you are you have to just imagine, you may not be a really skillful meditator, but for the sake of this mental exercise, imagine you were just the highly, highly skilled meditator after decades of meditation. So you sit down to meditate, your back is aching, your head is hurting, your life is so complicated, you have all of these problems, and you sit down and close your eyes and meditate. And at first, you're still pretty miserable. But as you meditate, your mind starts to quiet down. And you withdraw your attention from the world around you. The first step of withdrawing your attention is when you close your eyes. So you withdraw your attention from the world around you. You also withdraw your attention from your body. And you'll be surprised that if you are a really skillful meditator, all the pain in your back and the throbbing of your headache can recede from your awareness if you're a skillful meditator. So you withdraw from all that pain and suffering. Your mind becomes more and more quiet. As your mind becomes more quiet, what happens to all the problems in your life? You find out that you've invested in this kind of Bitcoin or whatever, and it's gone. So many possible problems in life. So all of your investments are in this particular Bitcoin, and this particular Bitcoin is now worthless. You've lost so much money, you have all these problems. What happens to all your problems as your mind becomes more quiet? They also recede from awareness. There's something very significant in that process. The more your mind becomes quiet, the more suffering recedes. And to put it positively, again, imagine yourself as this really skillful meditator. What will you experience in meditation is not only that your miserable situation in your life, that miserable situation is receding, but simultaneously you feel yourself approaching something very desirable. So look at that. You feel like if this is the misery of your life, you feel yourself moving away from that misery and towards that which is desirable. That's what, if you are being that skillful meditator, that is exactly what you will experience in meditation. Moving away from the undesirable, moving towards that which is desirable. The more quiet your mind becomes, the closer to that which is desirable you feel yourself moving. Does that make sense? The quieter your mind becomes, you feel yourself approaching closer and closer that which is most desirable. When your mind is perfectly silent, you find yourself at your destination, so to speak, that which is most desirable. What remains after your mind becomes perfectly silent, of course, is consciousness, your true self, your nature, your awareful nature remains. That awareful nature is what Shankara calls here priyaha mama, that which is most desirable to me. That which is most desirable is achieved, and here's the irony, that which is most desirable is achieved how? Neti, through negation. Boy, that really sets conventional thinking on its head. That which is most desirable is achieved through negation. And in particular, negation of your identification with your body and mind, negation in the sense of removing the ignorance that prevents you from recognizing your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma. When everything is negated, when everything else is removed, what remains? You, unencumbered by the problems of the world, the problems of your body, and the problems of your mind. Then Shankara concludes, very last word, tataha, therefore, for this reason, third line, yat anyat ataha, that which is other than what remains through the process of negation, that which is other than atma, anatma. So that anatma, which is ataha viparitam, which is opposed to that perfect peace and contentment, opposed to what remains after that process of negation. So anything else, he uses this very, very elegant language, but what it really means is anything else other than atma, what about it? Tyajet. Give it up. Sakriyam, along with any action, any effort. So give up anything other than atma, along with your efforts, those 4 kinds of efforts or actions that we discussed before. And what Shankara's point here is the importance of this process of negation. And let me just end by coming back to these 4 kinds of action. And that is, let me get this point right for you. I said already, you cannot gain perfection through limited means, and these are limited means. So then how do you gain perfection? If these 4 kinds of action cannot, I have to stay with this. You cannot, number 1, you cannot gain perfection. You cannot create perfection. You cannot transform the imperfect into the perfect. And you cannot remove all the imperfections so that what remains is perfect. Then how do you gain perfection? And if you follow this text, you know, through negation. Imperfection is due to ignorance. Your true nature is already perfect. And this is the point I wanted to end with. I get my guru's words here, because they're very nice words. You already are that which you want to become. You already possess that which you want to gain. Therefore, these 4 kinds of action are useless. What is important is that you discover the fact that you already are that which you want to become. You have to discover the fact that you already possess that which you want to possess. So this is gained through then a process of negation of identification with the body and mind, negation of removal of ignorance. Okay, that concludes our study of chapter, what is this, chapter 11? 11? Yes. So we begin then chapter 12 in our next class, which is the Prakasha Prakaranam, the chapter on light, the light of consciousness. We'll see that next week. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat. Very nice.